uh, Professor Dharendra Yogi Goswami. He is a professor and director, Clean Energy Research Center, University of Florida, United States of America. Dr. D. Yogi Goswami is a distinguished university professor and director of Clean Energy Research Center at the University of South Florida. Professor Goswami is the editor-in-chief of the Solar Energy Journal and Progress in Solar Energy. He has published 21 books and more than 350 referred technical papers. He also holds 22 patents, some of which have been successfully commercialized. Dr. Goswami is a recipient of highest awards of many professional societies related to solar energy. He has been inducted in the Florida Inventors Hall of Fame. Most recently, his invention of photoelectrochemical oxidation technology for air purification, which is commercially available, was picked up as one of the 25 best innovations by Time magazine. You are welcome, Mr. Yogi. Our next speaker is Mr. Jayant Parimal. He is the Chief Executive Officer, Renewable Energy with Adani Green Energy Limited, India. He is an IAS officer of 1989 batch. He has done his BE in Electrical Engineering in 1988 from MNIT Allahabad and Masters of International Law and Economics in 2004 from World Trade Institute, Bern. During his long and illustrious career in administrative services in various capacities with Government of Gujarat and Government of India, he has held various administrative posts. In Adani Group, he is looking after Group's renewable energy business. Earlier, he has served with Reliance Industry Limited as President Special Projects in Mumbai. You are welcome, Mr. Parimal. Mr. Manoj Kohli, Executive Chairman, SoftBank Energy, SoftBank Group, India. Mr. Manoj Kohli is Executive Chairman of SB Energy, SoftBank, SoftBank, Bharti Enterprises and Foxcom have formed the joint venture, SB Energy. Before this, Mr. Manoj Kohli was Managing Director, Bharti Enterprises and responsible for the growth and operation of Bharti Group of companies. Regarding this, he has the experience of telecom as well as now in solar. I'll recall the address of State Minister of Uttar Pradesh yesterday, where he has said that the telecom revolution which have transformed the life in India, now the next stage is for the solar revolution. And Mr. Kohli fits in both the sectors. He has worked in telecom and now in solar. He is taking it forward. We may see the same thing applies perfectly for Mr. Kohli. You are welcome, Mr. Kohli. Thank you. Next speaker, Professor Rangan Banerjee. He is the Head of Department Energy Sciences from IIT Bombay, India. Professor Rangan Banerjee is the Forbes Marshall Chair Professor and Head of the Department of Energy Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay. His areas of interest include energy management, modeling of energy systems, energy planning and policy, hydrogen energy and fuel cells. He is on the editorial board of a number of international journals. He was the faculty advisor to Team Shunya, the first Indian student team selected for the finals of the Solar Decathlon 2014 held in Europe. He has co-authored a book on planning and demand-side management. He is also an adjunct faculty honorary in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Mr. Rangan, you are welcome. Mr. Sanjiv Malhotra, Director, Energy Investor Center, the United States Department of Energy, United States of America. Dr. Sanjiv Malhotra is the first Director of the Energy Investor Center located within the Office of Technology Transitions at the US Department of Energy. EIC works with program offices within DOE as well as with DOE's national labs in crafting innovative models for public-private partnership with the objective of enhancing private sector investment for DO funded projects. You are welcome, Mr. Malhotra. Next speaker is Mr. Tomas Schlegl, if I am pronouncing this correctly. He is the head of the department Energy System Analysis, Fraunhofer Institute of Solar Energy System, Germany. Dr. Thomas is the head of department Energy System Analysis. He is physicist from universities Regensburg, Germany and Montpellier, France, and has received his doctorate at Fraunhofer ISC from University of Regensburg for a dissertation on the conversion of low energy radiation into electric power. His professional experience in the field of semiconductor and solid state technology with a focus on photovoltaics. You are welcome, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. Next is Thomas Kåberger. Yeah. So, he is the Executive Board Chairman, Renewable Energy Institute, Japan. Dr. Thomas Kåberger is a professor in industrial energy policy at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden and Executive Board Chief of Tokyo-based Renewable Energy Institute. He serves as a non-executive director of the European power company Vattenfall as senior advisor to Beijing-based JEDECO and a member of Swedish National Climate Policy Council. You are welcome, Mr. Thomas. Our next speaker is Mr. Rahul Munjal. He is the chairman and managing director, Hero Future Energies India Limited, India. He is the chairman, and the company came into existence in the year 2012. Is the first ever initiative of the Hero Group of to foray into renewables. Hero Future Energies is a wind and solar energy integrated power producer and is one of the biggest success stories in renewable energy in India, with offices in London and Singapore. This company is on its way to expanding globally and becoming an MNC. Mr. Rahul is presently co-chair of Confederation of Indian Industry, National Council on Solar Energy. You are welcome, Mr. Rahul. With the panelists on board and the stage, now I'll request the moderator of the session, Mr. Ashish Khanna, to take over and take the session forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always difficult to sit on this side and that side immediately after lunch, but I have very illustrative panelists on this side. And I'm very sure that they will keep you engaged. And thanks for your time, which you have accorded for this session. Without going further into details, since we have a lot of people on the stage too, let me start by having 2 minutes expressions on the subject itself. Starting from Rahul per se, yesterday the Prime Minister of India has said, it's one sun, one word and one grid. What do you think is the future of solar energy?
So, if with your permission, moderator, I'll say what is the future of renewable industry. And I think in conferences like this, we should today be talking about how renewables will be 100% of the energy source for our country. And to do that, what challenges do we face? And I think in today's day and age, that's the discussion we should be having, and it's not if, it's when. And for that, how do we get there? You know, we all understand the problems of intermittency. We understand those problems. But the issue is a mindset. You know, if you've read what happened between Edison and Tesla, when energy was started, there was a big debate, AC versus DC, right? And of course, AC won, and it continues to continues to be the way we transfer energy. So I don't think it's about when renewables, I don't know if it's one grid is the solution, but whatever the solution is, that's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about 100% renewable energy solution for the world, especially for India, in another 2 decades.
Thanks, Rahul. Dr. Banerjee, you would like to elaborate on that?
Yes, I think the country has had a significant progress in renewable energy, as we witnessed today in this conference. We have made we had one transition where we transited from traditional rural energy to fossil fuels. Now we are going back in that direction from fossil back to renewables. The challenges are that, today we are 60 gigawatt or 23 gigawatt of solar. And the challenges are the rules when we are now in the mainstream. And there are some concerns when we try to think in terms of we should be going towards 100% renewables, but we need to address what is happening on the ground. So a couple of things that we need to focus on is we need to see how integrate fossil and renewables. The problems that we are currently having, we are going in renewables in the same large centralized way we would like to build 600 megawatt, 1000 megawatts, and maybe we should emphasize a little more on the decentralized systems and try to see how we can have our policies to have more of decentralized systems also coming in. The other challenge that we have is that when we try to back down our coal-based power, we have an issue because the DISCOM health of the DISCOMs is not good, and the DISCOMs are not willing to sign the power purchase agreements. When we want to really integrate into the mainstream, we need to look at the overall system and try to get innovative solutions to this. We also need to see that the systems of the future, as we are going to go for 25-30% of renewables by generation and we go to 50-100%, we will need to think in terms of balancing, we need to think in terms of storage, and we need innovative technologies, innovative solutions for this. Another concern from an Indian point of view is that today 84% or so of our modules are imported, and a large part of this is from China. We need, our module manufacturing is not doing well. We need to think in terms of indigenous technology development. We need to think in terms of capability in R&D. The technologies of the future, whether in solar or in storage, are going to be quite different, and we need to really innovate and build up R&D capability together in terms of industry and academia to see that we really have the sunny side up for the country.
Jayant, we're starting the day with the challenges. Anything positive you feel it is also happening?
Positive, let me tell you, there is less publicized data. On one particular day in the state of Karnataka, in 24 hours, 73% of the energy came from renewable. The secretary in charge of power, he was here. In fact, I told him that you should publicize it. When Germany achieves a particular level, it is there everywhere. UK achieves it, it is there everywhere. But in the state of Karnataka, on a particular day, they achieved 73% renewable. This means that although the grid situation of Karnataka is nothing great, not to write back home, but still it can sustain 73% penetration on a particular day. This means that there is a huge scope, and we should not too much worry about renewable integration, etc., etc. If the state of Karnataka can have 73%, we are only talking about 25-30% integration. So that's a positive thing. In the state of Tamil Nadu, on several occasions, the renewable within a 24-hour period has been more than 50%. And mind you, in India, the definition of a renewable is very restrictive. It is only solar, wind, small, less than 25 megawatt hydro. Large hydros are not treated as a renewable. So with this, if you can achieve this much, this is a very, very good thing. And I think the Indian grid is good. And we need to do a little more work. And with more work, I believe we can have much more penetration of renewable in this country. So this is a positive thing. And one more challenge, although it has not been flagged by several, but we being an industrial player, we are seeing a huge issue on solar forecasting and scheduling. The current norms, the regulators have come out. It is not in consonance with technology. The ask for the regulator is very high, and we are losing 15 paisa every day on our forecasting and scheduling, and it is going to be the biggest problem at 2 rupee 44 paisa, 2 rupee 45 paisa tariff. If I lose at least 15 paisa as a penalty on forecasting fuel, this is going to be a big challenge for all of us. And slowly it is becoming mandatory state after state. So we all have to put our minds together, heads together, how to get out of it.
Thank you. Professor Yogi, Jayant has touched upon the aspect of technology, and the pattern has passed at the right time. You have seen technologies of PVs, and now you are a big propagator of CSP2. What do you think about this industry, and what's the future?
All right, I'll stand up since there are a lot of people in the back who can't see us. So if you don't mind, it is okay. All right. So the question is the future of solar energy. As a person who's been involved in the Indian scene of solar energy for the past almost 40 years, and also the person who gave a draft solar energy policy to Modi ji for Gujarat, which actually turned things for the whole country. Let me say this, that coming from that point in 35 years back, today we are in an excellent position in India that we're not talking about whether, if, we're talking about how much we can move forward. The point I want to make is, in terms of the future, I see all our apples going in one basket, which is photovoltaics, PV. And somebody mentioned that 85% of that is being imported from outside, mostly China. We can make solar power by thermal route also, which is called CSP, concentrating solar power. That is where 60% or 70% of what you need is already being manufactured in India, cheaper than anywhere else in the world. The other 30 to 40% can be done here because part of that is construction anyway. So there, the future technologies, or the technology that is at the forefront right now, is what we call the supercritical carbon dioxide technology, where you can get an efficiency of conversion of 55%. So we need to pursue some of those technologies, get them into pilot stage, and get them into commercial stage as soon as possible. For one thing, it will do, as somebody else mentioned, that energy storage is the key to our use of solar and wind and all of the renewable energies. Now, energy storage you can do with batteries, which is what almost everybody is thinking about. But you can do it also by way of thermal energy storage and mechanical energy storage. Thermal energy storage right now is about 1/10 the cost of battery storage. And if you do CSP, that allows you to do thermal energy storage. So in fact, with the integration of the conventional thermal power, solar thermal energy power, and thermal energy storage, that becomes actually your base load, all coming from solar energy. So that's the point I would like to make, that that's where we need to think about for the future.
Thomas, if I can ask you, Jayant mentioned about Karnataka on the 76%. I think the 1st January this year, Germany was the first day it was 100% renewable. For 76 hours in April, UK has 100% of renewable. How do you think that this sun is moving? And what's the future?
What is the future? Perhaps I start with the past. In the past, we have realized that renewable energy technologies, especially photovoltaics, have been always underestimated, the potential, which was also an advantage. Also an advantage because, of course, there are groups which started to fight photovoltaics because renewables take off business from conventionals, of course. And we have seen such a tremendous drop in costs and manufacturing costs for photovoltaics, so that renewables and among that also photovoltaics are the most competitive technologies now. And now for the future, I see renewables and especially photovoltaics is still underestimated. It's a semiconductor technology. You have a similar learning curve like computer chips, and or flat panel screens, semiconductors. You know how cheap they are, like compared to 10 years ago. And I'm strongly convinced that within the next 30 years we can reach investment costs for utility scale power plants of around $300 per kilowatt peak installed. And this will make photovoltaic so cheap that it will completely change the energy system. And this comes to a next step, that we have to integrate the produced energy like in an intelligent way into the grid. Of course, there will not be only photovoltaics. There will be other technologies which can deliver power on demand, like CSP in sunny countries. There will be technologies which have to enable our system to be more flexible, storages, demand-side management, and also new trading schemes like blockchain technologies. And this will put a challenge on each country also to change the regulation for market schemes, that each country is able to introduce new market schemes for trading electricity, for trading power. And here, I think all countries have differences because of national regulations, but although will have common experiences which are to share.
Thanks. Thanks, Thomas. Thomas, if my pronunciation is slightly better. On this part that today, the technologies and the grid integration has been mentioned out there today. This year, 2018, I believe, will be that momentous year, especially for cricket-playing countries, where Century makes a big views and gets the optics. We will be adding on this year more than 100 gigawatt of solar energy. What do you think about this integration technologies which are there on the grids part?
I think there are very many alternatives to keep the electricity system balanced. There are great new opportunities with information technology to control consumption in such a way that you reduce the cost for the consumer. There are storage technologies of various kinds. There are opportunities to produce fuel from electricity. And there are ways to control the power output of various kind of power plants. So there are a lot of opportunities. The balance issue for electricity grid is extremely important. It's vital. The electricity grid does not work if you don't have balance. But that does not mean that it is particularly difficult. You need to know what you're doing. You can earn a lot of money if you do it in an efficient way, provided regulation is decently set up. Traditionally, the electricity system has worked so that there had been a large producing company responsible for keeping the balance. They have allowed customers to consume electricity whenever they like, and the power companies have tried to balance that at all moments. It's quite difficult, but it's doable. So far, the producers of solar and wind in particular have been treated just like customers. They've been allowed to produce whenever they like, and the prices they have received have been stable. This has been an essential way of reducing the risks to the investors in the early phase. But if we're going to come towards a very large share, or 100%, or more than the current electricity generation from different renewables, and they should not only be solar PV but different, then it is important that the value of the electricity produced is correctly measured, and the signal of the value is sent both to producers and consumers so that they can balance. And the value of electricity will vary with time, and it will not only vary because of variation in consumption, but because of variation in production. And if we're going to select correctly amongst all the different opportunities to keep the system balanced, to use the cheapest available ways, minimizing the cost to the electricity consumers, then the price signal is going to be very important, that is transparently set, available to anyone, so everyone can earn money from using the difference in value of electricity. We're not there yet, almost anywhere. I think we did go a long way in that direction when the electricity market in Northern Europe was re-regulated a couple of decades ago, where we do have functioning spot markets and customers who actually pay the hourly or quarterly price based on the actual spot market value at that very moment. But there are a long way to go in many countries, and it will require a lot of more measurement and data handling, and it will require legislation that clearly allocates the economic liability for those who fail to keep balance between the electricity they have promised to supply and the actual supply, or the balance between their consumers and their producers. You can have competition, but you need to ensure that you have economic liability for imbalances. In the short term, though, I would add before handing on the mic here that it's also very important that the legislation is predictable for investors. That does not mean it should be stable. Legislators should learn and improve, but when they change legislation, it must never negatively affect the conditions of those who have already taken investment decisions. It's not only that some people will be sad when they lose money because of political decisions. It will also discourage new investors to come in to the energy sector if they do not trust that the conditions they expect when they take the investment decision, that if they do not expect that that will be stable, then they will ask for extra return on the investment to cover the risk, which will make electricity more expensive to the consumers in the end. So predictability and respect for those who have already invested is extremely important in the short term, and in the long term, increased market pricing with time to make the selection of how you balance the electricity system as efficient and low cost as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Manoj, your views on Sunnyside up. How sunny it is and how up it is.
No, thank you. First, I want to congratulate the Government of India and MNRE, and Mr. Gupta is here. Congratulations for organizing this wonderful conference. I think it's very timely. It is very vital for India's future. And I believe it's so good that we are talking about something which will be one of the two biggest transformations in the world. At SoftBank, we believe that energy transformation and transport transformation led by solar and led by EV are the two biggest transformations which will happen. And we are committed, at SoftBank, we are fully committed to these two transformations. We'll be very actively playing it. We also believe that India, we are also confident that the sunshine which God has given us, the wind which God has given us, and the water which God has given us, these three God-given gifts will be 100% of the energy mix in 20 years from now. Now, if the opportunity is so large, then how do we manage this opportunity so that it can be managed, the transition can be managed in a systematic, orderly fashion? That is the role we have to play. Because opportunity is very, very large for all the companies, multinational companies, Indian companies to participate. I don't think there is enough capacity in the industry to cope with the opportunity. Opportunity is far bigger than the capacity. So what do we do? Number one, technology will lead us to affordability. I have no doubt that solar technology will, over the next decade and maybe 2 decades, will be dramatically improving. Not only in terms of generation, but also in terms of
technology. And for our audience, I'm going to share a story here, that'll actually help you understand what I'm talking about. I had just started my second venture. This was a company called Urja Protonics. And, I'm glad I'm sitting here in India. I don't have to explain to you guys what Urja means. In US, I had to always tell them it's not a ex-girlfriend's name or a wife's name. It means energy. So I used to explain that all the time, but I don't need to explain that to you guys. And Sequoia Capital, which is one of the better-known VC firms, had invested in my company. And they told me, they said, Sanjiv, we would like you to go meet with this one entrepreneur. A few of you guys, if you've heard me talk in the past, might know this story, so I apologize in advance. But so anyway, so they said, we want you to go meet with this entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Just go spend some time with him, and if he's interested, he might invest in you. So I go there and meet with this guy. And before I could sit down, he asked me, he said, are you from India? I said, yeah, I'm from India. He says, I've been to India, I've traveled extensively in your country. And as an investor, as an entrepreneur, I've learned a lot about innovation in your country. I said, well, that's very good. Yes, my country is very innovative. We actually repair our chappals rather than throwing away the, for the non-Hindi speaking people, chappal is a slipper. So rather than throwing it away, we just repair it. So that's innovation, and that's cost saving. So he says, well, you know what? When I traveled in your country, I saw an elephant. And that to me was the aha moment when I realized I've seen innovation at its best. He could see that here is this guy totally confused. And I was confused. Here I'm about to talk about investments and innovation, and this guy is talking about elephants. He says, I was traveling in New Delhi when I saw this elephant walk past. And the elephant had a bell in its neck. The elephant would move and the bell would ring. And the kids from their houses would hear the bell, come out, give some money to the owner of the elephant and get a ride. By then he could see that I was thoroughly confused. He says, well, I'll tell you what, or rather why I found it to be innovation. He says, the elephant is like a large company, SoftBank. The bell is like a startup. The large company, Manoj, excuse me saying this, the large company might move at a small pace. And it's not just SoftBank, any large entity, public sector, private sector. The large company is going to move at a slow pace. The bell that's hanging from the neck of the elephant is going to be ringing at a very fast pace. That's a startup. Startups are very nimble. They want to move very fast. They want to get revenues. They want to hire the best people. They want to be profitable, etc., etc. When they're together, the elephant and the bell, things happen. The elephant, you take the bell away from the elephant, or you take the startup away from the large company, things are going to be moving very slow. No one's going to hear the elephant coming down the street. No one's going to notice the startup. At that time, I realized that, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. Any guess in this audience who this guy might be? This was Steve Jobs. So, that meeting lasted about 15, 20 minutes. He didn't invest in the company then. I went back to him a few times, and he became an angel investor in Urja. And after quite a few such stories about his innovation or learning of innovation in India. So, the reason I point this out is, I don't know what the future of renewable energy is, or the future of energy storage is, or the future of solar is. But one thing is for sure, if we want to minimize the risk, minimize or make it more predictable, we need to ensure that large companies, large entities, whether public sector, private sector, work very closely with startups, with entrepreneurs, and I'm hoping that a large portion of this room are either entrepreneurs or folks who are working at a startup or looking to start a company. It's very important for that kind of joint venture or strategic partnerships to happen, because that way we can enhance the predictability and reduce the risk. So coming back to your question, Ashish, as to what do investors look for? Investors essentially look for the team. It's all about team. If somebody has made them money in the past, they go back to the same person. Secondly, they look at access to big brothers. You know, if a startup is working with a large company, it's minimizing the risk. The third is obviously technology. But before the technology, it's how much is your supply chain risk reduced. So those are the four things that investors look for. And I would say that sitting where I am at AI, machine learning, high performance computing, IoT, 3D printing, etc., that is where we are putting our money, and that is what we feel is going to be the future. So Ashish, hopefully I'll answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Rahul, one question to you. You talk about there are a lot of questions on and statements on the policy framework. Now let's come back to India. What are those policies framework you think has really helped us to leapfrog from 4 gigawatts in 2014-15 to 23 as we speak now? And it's two parts onto it. What is your suggestion for improvements? And in the absence of those improvements, what
has, where energy becomes, or electricity becomes, the right for every human being in India. That should be our overarching goal first. Then let's start questioning ourselves about state and center. You know, we have two different bodies running renewable energy. For most of the people who are in the industry know, none of the states have common policies. Every state works independently. Center has its own thought. Do we need this dual system? Of course, you know, people say impossible to think about it. Why are you thinking out of the box? Can never be done, but let's at least question it. How efficient is the system? Then let's do away with the center if it only needs to be the state system. But let's at least question it. Let's bring it to a debate. We've been hearing about carriage and content for a very, very long time. You know, I think it's time to seriously take a look and separate the two. Carriage is a separate business. Content is a separate business. We've had so many examples about telecom and telecom doing so well and what government can do or what government can't do. Bring in competition. Bring in competition in content. Very recently, I was at a dinner in London, and almost everybody on the table told me they paid more for their energy in England because they opted for renewable energy, and they were very proud of it. So it wasn't mandatory. It wasn't. It was a choice, but everybody chose to do it. Of course, I don't think as Indian consumers we are there yet. But if this is where the world is headed, what is the learning for us in it? You know, we need to start asking ourselves that. What about so the biggest problem in renewables, as I see it today, is one of land. You know, renewables, be it wind or solar, requires lots and lots of land. And I always tell people, only 5 to 10% of the cost of the project is land, and 95 or 99% of the pains in a project is land. Our energy as a company, as IPPs, goes in acquiring that land. So we're all chasing after land, and I think that's why I heard more than one people talk about solar parks and congratulating that. Of course, we want the government to have solar parks because it's impossible to get land in India. And we have a solution, digitization. Digitization of land records, or moving them to blockchain. These are simple solutions. These are technologies which can get us there. But let's actually do them now. So I think the policies around land, policies around carriage and content, policies around central subject versus the state subject versus every state having a separate subject. If these are some of the things that we look at, I think renewables, at least the 175 gigawatt, will seem extremely easy, and the next goal of 250, 300, whatever the next target of the government would be, would also seem very easy. But these are the policy interventions that we need from the government at this point.
Thanks, Rahul. Jian, you have a background of a bureaucracy too, and there was a mention about the elephant. But we have also seen that the dragon also is much more agile than the elephant we talk out here. What are your suggestions about the policy framework and what is required to be done? And what risk mitigation measures as a developer we are taking now for carrying on all those policy initiatives which are not there today?
On the policy side, several things have already been mentioned by Manoj. The counterparty risk, especially in the case of states. So the Government of India entities are acting as intermediaries and trying to reduce the risk, which is SECI and NTPC. So that's a very good move. Maybe slowly we'll see more and more NTPC SECI bids. So they will intermediate. So we as a developer will see less risk that is already happening. And then on the land side, we need a clear policy because it is a state subject, and we need a lot of land. Most of the states have very simple state laws, but several states have very complicated land laws, especially states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. As a result, the 12-month project, 13-month project, it gets stuck. And we have had very bad experience in Karnataka, although the Government of India had been very supportive and somehow we could scrape through. But this is a very big problem. In several states, land seeding policy, land procurement policies and all are still not amenable to renewable energy. So as a developer, we are facing a lot of issues. One way is to simplify it. Another way is to go for parks and all. Park government is promoting 20,000 megawatt has already been done. Incremental 20,000 is being thought of. So that's a good one. So having more parks will help. But maybe if the government simplifies the land policy, it will be excellent. And then several states have policies on land to give government waste land at a reasonable rate. But at times I am finding the states like Gujarat and all, they have started discriminating whether the power is consumed within the state of Gujarat or whether it is going outside. So now they have come out of a policy where if you are selling the power to the DISCOM of Gujarat, they will ask you X rate per acre for the government land. And if it is sold to somebody else, first of all, they may not allot it. And even if they allot it, it will be 10x. So this is becoming a big issue. So maybe all the states will have to come forward and try to harmonize the thing. And then payment security, Manoj has already touched upon. Government of India has already thought of some payment security fund, etc. I am sure if it is strengthened better, then it will do good. And Manoj has also touched upon the backing down issues, because more and more renewables are there. There is a big risk of backing down, sometimes technical, sometimes not so technical. We were facing backing down issues only in states of Tamil Nadu. Of late, we face certain issues in the state of Karnataka also. So we are fearful that in such competitive environment where all of us have quoted perhaps the lowest possible bid, if there is a backing down of even 2%, 3%, or 5%, it will simply disturb our apple cart. So that has to be taken care of, and maybe some kind of a compensatory mechanism will have to be provided for. Future PPAs may have something, but the existing PPAs do not have that kind of a facility. So some clarity and policy initiative is needed on that. And then what I mentioned earlier, forecasting scheduling of the solar and other renewables. We are not saying that we do not want to forecast or schedule, but please, this is a God-given resource. It is not in our control. So do not penalize us beyond a point. If you do aggregate it at a state level, the renewables do not, all the positives and all negatives, they add up, and ultimately you have near zero variation. So what we are trying to advocate to government as well as the energy regulatory commissions to go for some kind of a regional level aggregation of all the renewables so that we do not get unnecessarily penalized at each plant level. So these are the policy initiatives which we believe will go a long way. And plus financing is going to be an issue. This has been discussed in past also. The government has to come out and have a separate limit only for renewable projects. Otherwise, financing 175 gigawatt of renewable in a span of 5 years, 6 years will be a big challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, Jayant. Thomas, if I can ask you, you have seen major part of the world having a policy framework which has been changing, and there are lots of learnings. If you have to give some recommendation for some policies which India should adopt, considering their vision and their mission and the journey so far which you have observed, what would be those top 3?
Well, first of all, I think India has done well in establishing rules for the early deployment of solar. And the auctions held have shown how you can bring down the prices. What you will need when the contribution from solar and wind increases is that you have to adjust the market so that you get correct price signals showing the value of electricity at each moment in time. That will be a vital reform that will be necessary to be able to control the balance of the grid at low costs. That's the simple answer. May I comment on 2 other things? Please. I heard you say that it was the right of everyone to have access to electricity. I think you are correct in that everyone has the right of a decent standard of living, but it's a bit dangerous to introduce it as if electricity should be for free. You need to. No, you didn't mean that, but it's important that we don't convey the idea that this is something that should be subsidized and offered for free, because then it will be unprofitable business, it will be managed in an inefficient way, and so on. So don't make electricity a victim of that ambition. Use other ways of contributing to ensuring that everyone has a decent standard of living. Also the land issue. Well, it might be a problem that you need land, but you can turn it from the other side and say, this is a wonderful opportunity of making land that is today useless and without value into something valuable. In many parts of the world, wind power has now become a major source of income for rural farmers, increasing the value of the land, making farming more economically attractive, and making rural living more attractive, and somehow making the distribution of wealth between urban and rural areas slightly less troublesome. So there are opportunities in all the issues that we are discussing here, and I'm getting old and a bit frustrated about problem definition. I think it's much more interesting to look for the solutions and opportunities in all these new developments.
Thank you. I'll come to Dr. Banerjee on this point about the distributed generation. You know, India has a potential, and there is a requirement of more than 200 million people without any source of power as we speak now. What do you think? Do you first of all believe that in this optics of tariffs and solarization, we are missing that particular part, which can be a business opportunity, but is also a social responsibility for all the businesses in place?
I think it's a business opportunity, but given the way businesses and structures have evolved, that business opportunity doesn't have a level playing field. So I think I can visualize individual households, individual companies, individual malls, each being a self-generator and then supplying to the grid. It means a completely different grid. And if we were starting from a green field, we could plan that way. Unfortunately, the way we have planned, the incentives and the returns are there so that it is all centralized. It's easier to finance, it's easier to take large tracts of land. But is that really the logical, sustainable way to go? So I think there is a big role for innovation in terms of new technologies at the distributed level. This is not going to happen in a business as usual case, but in a Sunnyside up case, I think this must be encouraged. And this is something where we need to see where the ministry, the academic institutes, the industry try to look at, and this is where startups, you talked about the belt, the startups are going to be the ones which are going to come up with this. We have lots of things happening now in the IoT space and things where we are miniaturizing. So I think we could visualize different energy systems, completely different, with demand response, storage at the short. And I think for India to be in that space, we need to think differently. We need to create that ecosystem and support it. So I think given things, of course, the ministry is doing its bit, but we are really going, and our goal is to quickly ramp up, which is a good goal that has its own challenges and problems. But sustainably looking at the future, I think there is a much bigger role for distributed options. And we need to think of not just electricity, we need to think of cooking, we need to think of transport, we need to think of integration and new ways of doing this. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. I think this is a challenge, but it's much more an opportunity, and we need to configure our systems to sort of capture that opportunity.
Okay. Thomas.
Can I add to, sorry to interrupt you, can I add to that? Because I really like what he said. And at Department of Energy, as I said, our budget is roughly about $8 billion for that triangle and within the triangle. However, we being Department of Energy, traditionally, historically, we've never paid attention to what we call user-inspired innovation or user-inspired research. The way we were funding these programs was, people would come to us, write a grant, we would go ahead and fund it, depending, or rather just validating the science aspect of it, the technology aspect of it. What has changed over the last, I would say, 2-3 years, and I'm not taking credit for this, even though I've been at DOE now just for a couple of years. What has changed over the last few years is essentially it is user-inspired research. And I would encourage the audience and the folks here to look up a book. I think it's on Amazon. It's called Pasture's Quadrant. It was written by a professor from Princeton University. His name is David, it's coming, but just type down, or David Stokes, or Daniel Stokes. What he argues in that book is essentially that science and innovation and government policy, when they work together, things will happen. And the reason he calls the book Pasture's Quadrant is because Louis Pasteur, the father of microbiology, he was doing research, basic research, R&D, discovery science, but he had his eye on a societal need. The other example he gives is the miniaturization of semiconductors. And the Department of Energy as well as US Department of Defense were very intimately involved with this program called Sematech. It was a $500 million program a few years back, or I would say a couple of decades ago, where the focus was, here's the market, we need to go beyond Moore's Law. And we brought in equipment manufacturers like Applied Materials, Novellus, Lam Research. We brought in chip manufacturers like Intel, for example, TSMC. We brought in users like Apple and a few others, and the government came in. That was a classic example of a very efficient public-private partnership. Again, user-inspired research moving from very early technology maturity level to very late. And the reason I bring it up is because policy had its eye on what the researcher wanted, yet at the same time there was a market that was pulling it. It was a market pull rather than a technology push. So to his point, even though he's from IIT, I'm sure he tells his students also, what's your future? But I totally agree with him.
Being IIT alumni, I also totally agree with you. But Thomas, if I come to
question, what's your future?
no way, Thomas, if I ask you from your standpoint, if India or the ISA countries have to adopt few technologies, considering the mandate they have, considering the aspirations they have, which are those few technologies you would advise to be adopted?
Well, I'm strongly convinced that we will have more and more fluctuating electricity in the grid. And this means that we have more and more high negative residual loads. And I believe in the medium to long term, we need technologies to cope with the high residual loads. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but the day after. And there is a bunch of technologies which can cope with this challenge, or which can help to cope this. Of course, it's like the well-known technologies like demand-side management, storage, getting flexibilization within the grid. But there are other options, call it sector coupling, that we take out electricity to sectors which are not yet electrified, mainly the traffic sector. You can do this with synthetic fuels, with hydrogen, with synthetic natural gas, for example. And I believe this will be more or less this step after the system integration with new market schemes, new markets, with new trading options than we have. That is, well, synthetic fuels and to cope with the high negative residual loads in the system.
And Professor Yogi, if we have to invest in innovations, then which are those areas of innovation you would like India to invest in, and how?
You have to start thinking about what are the energy needs of the people and how do we fulfill them. Normally people just start thinking, okay, photovoltaic, CSP and all of that, well, you're just producing electricity, because electricity is a very convenient form of energy. However, when we use energy, we use that in many different ways. Okay? So you start out with energy efficiency. That is, how do you do these energy uses where you use the least amount of energy to get that job done? So once you have considered energy efficiency, then you say, okay, is the need heat? Is the need cooling? Is the need transportation? So whatever are the needs, if you can fulfill them in the most direct way, using sunlight and using solar energy, that is where we need to invest, and that is where innovation will come. I'll give you an example. A lot of the energy around the world is used for air conditioning. That is keeping us comfortable. Now, the traditional way is we have electricity runs certain machines, and those machines give us cooling. Okay? That's a very indirect way. A most recent innovation has come up where we say, okay, if the objective is to reject heat, to remove heat from the buildings, can we just emit that heat and throw it into deep space? This is where plasmonic emitters have come up. That these are the emitters that you would maybe paint your buildings with, and those buildings will cool themselves because they are emitting energy in the wavelength range where atmosphere is transparent. That is 8 microns to 13 microns. And with those emitters, they're continuously emitting energy into deep space, and your building cools by itself. You don't need any machine. So we need to invest in innovations where we can take care of the needs of the society. As far as the present technologies are concerned, let's say photovoltaics, rather than keeping on doing, the normal photovoltaics, let's look at what are the other innovations. For example, the future technologies, whether it's the organic solar cells, whether it's the thin films, or whether it's a dye-sensitized, or even a nano antenna technologies, where these nano antennas convert sunlight to electricity directly. So there are many of these things. The point I'm making is start with energy efficiency. There's still a lot to be done in there because we are using a lot more energy to do certain things that we need to do than we really need to. So start with that. Then look into where you can use a technology to take care of your need in the most direct way.
Thank you. Manoj, you can have more too. There's no problem about that. Manoj, one question on the rooftop part. Like, we talk about the utility scale projects. We look at the distribution generations. If a developer like you, investor like you, needs and would love to invest more on rooftops, what would you like to have the policy framework and the technology solutions available with you?
SoftBank does not have any plan for rooftop.
I know that. That's why I'm asking.
So let me be very clear. But I feel that the central grid-connected large systems will supply the significant majority of the future needs. However, there are minority locations which are isolated and where taking the transmission is very expensive. For example, on hills, mountains, isolated villages, village has only 50 families or 20 families, and the transmission cost is huge. So there we will need off-grid, local grid, which is important. Rooftop, particularly in India, I've studied the solar city model of California, which is by and large based on tax breaks. It is not a viable model for India. India, firstly, the roofs are small. Secondly, the roofs are leaky already. They're not strong enough. And third, there are conflicts and litigation, etc., connected to roofs. So because of these three reasons, rooftop top solar will have a problem. And if you have to, let's say, put up a solar module, bunch of certain modules there, and charge X rupees, I think you're leaving your asset there. And I have learned from my telecom experience that post-paid doesn't work in India, prepaid works. So therefore, 99% of customers in telecom are prepaid, which works. So therefore, rooftop in India, I feel, doesn't have too much future.
Thomas, what about the opportunity and the challenges?
Well, I'd like to first disagree and then agree with Manoj. I think these arguments against rooftops were not going to convince everyone. There will be many people in India who will find solar rooftops desirable and profitable, and if you have a problem with a leaking roof, why not build a new solar PV roof and ensure it doesn't leak? And there are great opportunities for rooftop solar all over the world now. But what I think is important to continue discussing in the context of the high penetration renewables is the interaction between the electricity supply system and the fuel system. Last year, or this last winter, I published an article as a university professor which contained the most trivial calculations I've ever published. I took the trouble of recalculating the crude oil price in dollars per barrel into dollars per megawatt hour contained. And likewise the price in dollars per million British thermal units, which for some strange reason is how they measure the price of natural gas, into dollars per megawatt hour, and also coal in dollars per ton. And then you can see that today solar and wind electricity has a total life cycle cost that is well below the price of energy in crude oil. It's even lower than the price of liquefied natural gas. And that means that it is not only that it's not competitive to produce electricity from oil, we can even start considering producing oil or fuels from electricity, from renewable electricity. We see the substitution in the transport sector, which Manoj mentioned, that you can now use renewable electricity and batteries instead of fuel tanks, fossil fuel, and internal combustion engines in the transport sector. It is significantly more efficient, and it's now also economically competitive and performance-wise competitive. But we can also imagine producing fuels from renewable electricity for a lot of other purposes. And when you start doing that, you also get an electricity consumption into the electricity system that can be highly opportunistic, producing only when the value of electricity is low. And this will provide a baseline, a bottom line for how low the value of solar and wind can be, which is something that is very interesting for those who invest in solar and wind generation. They might also like to invest in electricity to gas or to fuel, electro-fuel production facilities to ensure that prices will never fall too low. And then we can reduce carbon emissions not only from electricity generation, but also from all other fuel uses in society. And this is quite important from the perspective of high renewable penetration in the energy system.
Sanjiv, a question to you. There are people who are concentrated solar, PV solar, fossil fuel, all that. A guy who's technologically agnostic as an investor, what would be your words of wisdom for this fossil and renewable to coexist?
I think Tomas talked about renewables being cheaper than natural gas. Very true. There was an article, I believe, in New York Times about a week or a couple of weeks ago, where it talked about how natural gas has been the catalyst for the demise for coal, and how today, without any incentives, in the US we have, it's called ITC, investment tax credit. You get $3,000 per kilowatt, or 30% of the average selling price, whichever is lower. Without ITC, renewables are cheaper than gas. So the overarching message, the DNA of that article was that essentially renewables in its current state, without incentives, can essentially kick gas out, which is obviously music to the ears of the people here. So the answer to your question, Ashish, I don't think there's a straight answer, but I am a big fan of looking at essentially, as I said earlier, market pull. And the message to the folks would be that, look, there are multiple markets, and I'm not going to get into an argument that Tomas and Manoj almost got into, whether rooftop is going to make it or not. I think there are multiple markets. What we need to do is essentially create a market, product, technology roadmap, and I gave this I talked about this in my earlier panel also for storage, that look at the market first, look at the features that the market needs, identify the product and the technology that can enable that product. Make that, and you will be amazed as to how the cost is going to keep crumbling down because of economies of scale. I mean, some markets might be price sensitive, the others might not be that price sensitive. Some markets might need a longer life, the others might not need a longer life. So I think by making that kind of a roadmap, which we have done over in my office at the Department of Energy, we have been surprised as to how many new markets have opened up, not only grid of the future, but also the next generation mobility. So my very short answer would be, let's make that here with the context of the Indian subcontinent, and I think there are sunny times ahead, or rather sunny times are here now.
Can I just point out a little important distinction? Sanjiv, when you talked about how renewables were outcompeting gas in the US, it is for electricity generation. And the gas price in North America now is very low, but still for electricity generation, renewables can outcompete natural gas. What I said was that also in other parts of the world where you don't have low-priced gas available from a gas grid, and you have to buy liquefied natural gas, then you can even outcompete the gas per unit energy, which is, there's a significant difference in gas prices in different parts.
Understanding the economics of the different geographies. Another, I'm a big fan of hybrid. So gas peaker systems with the storage, I think that's a winner too. So I think there are a lot of permutation and combination, and that's the name of the game.
I agree. I think we have not spoken about hybrid storage. They are great optics and points of interest, but we are short of time. So I will now like to throw open the panelists to the audience. You have to introduce yourself, and my suggestion would be, rather than having an opinion, if you can ask a question, that will help. And someone has to pass on. The gentleman in the front on the third row. Sir, please introduce yourself and your question addressed to the panelists. That will also help us.
Hello. My name is Gautam. I'm working on the Orange Renewable Power. So the question is to Manojji, So you have experience on the telecom, Can you make a very simple model in the solar as well, In telecom, what you have a different tower, and what you do, you give you give a third party, the contract, and based on the data, which is uses, it is paid, Here, in the solar, or it may be in the renewables, being as a developer, maybe you are developing 1 gigawatt. Either you can use the solar, or it may be wind, or it may be hybrid system with the, with the storage as well, So my question is, how do you see that these transformations from the telecom to the solar, you bring it and you get a kilowatt hour? That what we signed the PPA for 25 years, How do you see that this kind of a simple model it work? But there is a questions like de-risking of the either turbine or the solar module, You can have a third party contract to the module manufacturer, maybe with the Tata or with the Adani, So that you don't bother about the degradations of the module, whether they will use the P-type, N-type, it may be taking different technology, So those things, what is your opinion on that?
No, if I can summarize it, I think he's talking about that in the telecom sector, it's technology agnostic. You have the cost of the usage out there. Here there are lots of technologies involved, and each has a different tariffs, even though there is a quality degradation and other things. So what do you think are the lessons from telecom to solar?
No, lessons are very clear, and I'll give you an example. About 16 years back, at Airtel we decided that we'll give our entire IT to IBM as one partner, and IBM will bring hardware, software, and 3,000 to 5,000 engineers to support our billing system and other IT systems. It was everything, end to end. So I think the future will be like this. Entire steel industry, entire aluminium industry, entire cement industry, all these guzzlers of power will come to companies who become energy partners, and they will negotiate a X price, that this is the price. Now behind that X price, it will be solar, it will be wind, it could be hybrid, it could be XYZ. That company which is asking for power for next 10, 20, 30 years is agnostic. That company is saying, you give me power, these are the specs of quality of power I need. I need power for 20 hours a day, I need this quality of power, this kind of annual maintenance I have, so you can also stop in these weeks when I have maintenance, so you can do your maintenance of your plants, etc., etc. So those specs will be given by the customer. So I feel the power industry will have two big changes in coming time. One will be this kind of B2C behavior. From B2B, it will become a B2C behavior, when we deal with the consumer directly. Not only a B2C consumer, but also B2B consumer. And second is open marketplace, the exchange. Power will be sold in the exchange. It's agnostic. I mean, green power may get some premium initially, but as someone was saying, but finally it is agnostic. Whatever the power is, I'll buy power at the exchange at the best price possible. So I feel those are the days which will come. I think finally it will be green power. Finally it will be exchange or B2C behavior rather than today's issues of PPA, etc., etc. This will all transition as the time goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman there.
Sorry, I think let's give chance to somebody.
My name is Hemant Lamba. I come from the Oroville International Township near Pondicherry. My question is about if we see the technology advancement in area of batteries, energy efficient, ultra high energy efficient devices, and the reducing costs of solar energy. Do we see any future of solar independent power producers? Because if the costs are coming down, would it go the Kochi airport way that I produce all my power, or go the Oroville way that we produce 150% more power using renewables? So is there a future for independent power producers in with these advancement of solar, all three technologies going further?
Got it. I initially thought I will bounce it to the technology, but I think Rahul, since the question is open, would you like to say, do you have a future here?
No, I think that's a very good question. But yeah, the answer is yes. There is a future, and I'll tell you why. Because there is no one size that fits all in India. It's a very, very complex situation. You're right, a lot of these companies will start their own power plants, or will start their own generation of their own power. But you must understand, the person who's investing in power versus the person who's investing in buying machines, which further adds to his revenue, there's always a choice. When money available to any businessman is finite, do you rather invest in another machine and increase your revenue, or do you rather lower your costs? If you want to lower your cost, you'll put power plant. If you want to increase your machine, you say, okay, Rahul, here is another 10 megawatt, 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt. Please provide it to me because I don't have the capital to do it. So the answer is, of course, there will be people who will be tempted to do it themselves, and why shouldn't they? But at the end of the day, I think we'll be able to offer them economies of scale, because it's not a one-off plant that we'll do for them. We'll do, we'll probably sell them energy out of a plant which is 100 megawatts, 500 megawatts, 600 megawatts, whereas their plant would only be 10, 20 megawatts. So that's the answer to your question.
Thank you. Sure, please.
So I think I just like to connect it up with the last question which is there. So I think you're going to have independent energy suppliers who are going to supply. So the company, you talked about a company, and the company wants an energy supply. It is agnostic about where that supply is coming from. So that independent energy supplier will configure, and because of the experience of doing that at various places, that will be adding value in your system.
Thank you. Last question.
Yeah. I'm Amit Jha. I'm from academia. My question is on wind-solar debate. Wind versus solar
Sorry,
debate.
can you
Wind versus solar debate. Wind versus solar. Is it like there is an optimal mix for a company which is diversified? And if there is an optimal mix, is it favoring solar?
If there is an optimal mix,
Is it favoring solar?
is it favoring solar? Jen, you would like to take?
Wind and solar both are complementary. If you see their generation profile, mostly solar is definitely during daytime and wind is more in the evenings, night and in the morning. So actually when you marry both, you get a better output profile. So actually it is not wind versus solar. It has to be complemented. Now you know that Indian distribution companies they are very price sensitive, so they will prefer whichever is cheaper. But fortunately the regulators have their own norms and they have a wind RPO separately, solar RPO separately. So I don't think solar will be done at the cost of wind. And moreover, wind prices also have fallen due to government intervention, new ways of bidding, CTU bidding. So the power which can be produced cheap in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, they are transported all the way to Punjab. So the wind prices have also fallen dramatically and they are right now sub 3, significantly lower than sub 3, and it is comparable to solar. So I don't think solar energy is at the cost of wind. Yes, maybe the technological advancement which we see in solar maybe slightly more. So maybe going forward the path, it will fall further. Wind also may or may not fall significantly, but yes, solar may fall further. Distribution companies may be tempted to have a little more solar, although the regulators are there to balance it.
Yeah.
I just want to add one point to this, and Tulsi Bhai says this point all the time. All wind so far is made in India, and solar is not. So a lot of people try and say, oh, why are you importing solar panels not made in India? So for that, the answer is wind, most of it is made in India. So that's another answer of wind versus solar.
Can I give two concrete examples of how well they match? It's always easier the more different sources of electricity you have in a system. In Germany, they have managed, possibly by chance, to install solar and wind so that the lack of solar during the winter months in Germany is very well compensated monthly by more wind power being produced during the winter months. So that makes the system supply in Germany much easier because they have the mix. Vattenfall, the power company that I'm on the board of, has in Wales invested at one site in both wind and solar, with the benefit that they rarely produce at maximum power at the same time, so they share a lot of the infrastructure, which reduce the cost of the combined production of solar and wind. So blending solar and wind in a system is a great advantage compared to only going for one or the other.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think that we can take it offline. There are a lot of clouds which have come in this sunny side up, so I want to end on a positive note. Request to everyone, the last sentence, we all have been in this industry, passionate about it, and have been working for long. So if each one of you can, in one or two sentences, can share what was your aha moment so far in this sunny side up, starting from Val.
The moment here, so today?
Till now.
Till now. Yeah, so I truly believe when earlier Prime Minister said start thinking of megawatts, gigawatts, not megawatts. And today we actually think in gigawatts, we don't think in megawatts. So it's a belief. I think if we honestly believe that renewables is going to be 100% of the energy source, it will. And we need to throw our cobwebs away at some point and start believing in the future. Because it's not that hard.
Thank you, Ram. Dr. Banerjee, if you can be personal, say what was your aha moment?
Aha moment individually is when I saw a team of young students designing, planning, developing, getting the funds for, and building a house which is running completely on solar and then exporting to the grid. A net solar positive house. This is a team of young Indian students who've done this, and they removed the house, shipped it to Vasai, built it over there. We've rebuilt it on the IIT campus so that individuals and students can actually do this and they can make this happen. We can see a future which is going to be a sunny side up future.
Thank you. Yeah.
There was a bid in which SoftBank also won at 463 and Sun Edison was the leader. So we all were scratching our head, how come they can make money at 463? I mean, we were nowhere near. So we went back to the drawing boards. Maybe 2 months later, we quoted something lower than this. So that was an aha moment. So if you go back to the drawing board and go and try to innovate and try to find out what is latest, and this is how the cost has come down, and people like us also have been able to compete against the mighty Sun Edition and people like them.
Professor Yogi.
About 20 years back, I was asked to give a keynote lecture on future of solar energy. And I did analysis of the existing resources, the fossil fuels and all. And the answer I came up with was that by 2050, at least 50% of our energy will have to come from renewable resources. We have no choice. People who heard that, they sort of said, oh, he's just dreaming. The aha moment is today, people think not only that 50%, people are now talking about 100% of our energy coming from renewables.
Thomas?
My aha moment was more than 10 years ago, when photovoltaics was still a good of luxury, not a mass product. And for a study, I had to compare the price experience curves of photovoltaics and computer chips. So, and I thought, wow, there is no reason why it cannot be the cheapest technology in the future for producing electricity. And there's still much potential for further reducing costs.
Thank you. Thomas. I will be done.
Yeah. I don't think it's one moment. I think it's basically the last 3 years when the predictions from the 20th century that costs of solar and wind and renewables would come down and make them competitive has come true. It's been wonderful to see the world prices slide down the learning curve and overtaking or undercutting rather the conventional thermal power. And this has made the turning point real when renewable electricity is not something you have to pay extra as a sacrifice for global climate, but an opportunity to facilitate and make possible global human welfare in the coming century. It's just so wonderful.
Great. Anuj?
Thank you. You know, I've had 2 aha moments, one 20 years back and one now, and they're similar. One aha moment is there was a feeling that landline, how will mobile overtake landline? Impossible. Some consultant gave us a report that India will have 50,000 mobiles. And today we have more than 1 billion. And I've seen landlines with a lot of dust. Nobody's using them. That is aha moment. And now the new aha moment is 73% in Karnataka, which you said. And I feel that this is a message of what is coming. The 73% will happen in each state of India. 73% will happen in India, and the environment will get blue sky in future. And that, I think, will be the aha moment for our country.
Take care. Sanjiv?
So, since everyone is talking about 20 years ago, I think I'll tell a story some 20 years ago too. And some of the folks who are here probably heard me talk about it in my earlier panel. I had just finished my PhD. I was working as a researcher in batteries. And my father called me, says, I think, son, it's time for you to get married. And those were the days when people, especially Indians, would go through arranged marriage. So I said, sure, why not? I was getting pretty bored with life anyways. And I go to meet with this one person who herself was a PhD in molecular biology or something like that. And we chit-chatted, and then she asked me what I was working in. I said, I'm working in batteries. She kept on asking me questions. Then after 5-10 minutes, she said, look, you're from a good family, which matters in arranged marriage, I guess. You have good education, but I just can't get over the fact you're working in batteries. She got up and left. that was the aha moment right there and then, because I decided, A, I'm not going to go through arranged marriage, which I did not after that. And second is, I decided I am not going to explain to people why the hell am I working in batteries, but I will start a battery company, I'll make it a success and show the people that batteries are going to be a success. So I ended up starting not one but two battery companies, or a few batteries and fuel cell companies. So that was the aha moment.
Thank you.
Yours.
No, my aha moment is very clear, and I thought I will say it at the end. After spending so many years out there, this is really an aha moment to have such a panelist and youth guest being moderating. It's a great moment for me, and I would like to thank the audience, the MNI, and the panelists out there for this wonderful discussion. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy.
I'll request you to please stay back for just 2 minutes more. One is we have to give a small memento to you. Please take a seat, and just I'll take 2 minutes to just speak about 1 or 2, 3 issues which I feel from Ministry side we should address, which has come up. One very relevant question Mr. Kohli has raised is how to manage the transition. Yes, and you have suggested that it is the time when people should come and get together and discuss on this. We welcome your suggestion. Yes, our ministry is already open and talk to all the people. And but if there is a very specific pointed issue pointed out, that the management of the transition from there for switching over to renewable, when the renewables increase and the pressure is on their grid, how to manage and how to balance and all that. Of course, the Prime Minister of India's statement that one grid, one solar and one earth, how does it take shape in times to come? Really, it may be a big challenge for all of us. One issue came up regarding regulations, penalty on, you said, scheduling and forecasting. Yes, a suggestion came was we should view it from the regional parity point of view, not an individual. A good suggestion. I think we should look into it, how the regulatory framework can work on it. That will definitely reduce the risk perception, and regional parity will definitely, because there may be a slight variation from X percent to Y percent, but as long as the regional grid is managed, possibly the penalties, issue-related penalties can be addressed. We can think about it. And this is a good issue regarding the grid. Of course, when the solar energy or renewable energy, which is an infirm power, comes, and grid stability and issues, and people have just suggested that it could be balanced with gas power, and which is easy to ramp up. And I just want to mention that already something we have started doing it, like our first tender in when we are going for in under isolated island like Andaman Nicobar, that the government has decided we not only solarize it by almost 50 megawatt is their power. We will provide a 50 megawatt solar over there, and also have a standby 50 megawatt LNG station, so that whenever there is a cloud, when there is a rain or anything, the ramp up is easy, and we also give a half-an-hour battery system to it, so that by the time it can do the ramp up. So these things are already our 160 megawatt, which SECI is bringing out a tender. There is also a hybrid and with a battery storage round the clock power which they are giving. Make in India was another thing. Yes, you said biggest success in transport is like a Maruti model. Yes, Make in India. I just mentioned. You also mentioned in Make India issue related to the land. I would like to share with you. Many of you may not be there when the Chief Minister plenary was there yesterday. We are happy to see how the Chief Ministers are coming forward, how the states are coming forward. Chief Minister for Himachal announced in the full form what they have done. In Himachal, you have a biggest problem in acquiring the land, and they had whenever you set up any the hydro plant, they have a 12 years royalty. They have already made the land availability, government land availability at ₹1 per square meter, he says, for renewables, and all the royalty they have deferred, and they say for up to 25 megawatt, whatever power is to purchase, it will not be through regulator. The electricity board have been permitted to directly buy it. What a transition in the thinking process. UP Chief Minister and the Pondicherry Minister both said we want a manufacturing to come to their states. And when I mentioned to them that we are already coming out with a tender where 10 gigawatt power plant linked with the 3 megawatt manufacturing there. Please offer your incentives. You offer the land and the developer want that they should be permitted to use, it is an energy intensive industry. If you permit them to utilize, to set up the power plant of the solar energy requirement and utilize that energy for their power plant, it will give a relief to them as far as the energy cost is concerned. And Solar Energy Corporation is going to, at least they have visited 5 or 6 states and met their principal secretaries and chief ministers, see how they can do it. So this is a very good transition in the thinking process and in the land reforms and other such things which will definitely come up. That is what I thought. Yeah, backing down you say. Yeah, that issue already ministry is thinking and taking up with the states, and that is the issue, because somebody has also mentioned that backing down, if at all something comes in future, not anything comes should be not retrospective, it should be prospective. These things are coming. Just one more thing, distributed solar. There was a discussion on this. Yes, and you said it should be a user-inspired research. Yeah, all of you are here. I'll request that already a thinking process is going on. If you get a chance and go outside and see 4 or 5 models are displayed by National Institute of Solar Energy. They were also displayed before Prime Minister. One of the very good example I'll tell you is in Leh Ladakh Kargil area. The temperature is -20, -25 degrees centigrade. For 6-7 months they are cut off. They don't grow the vegetable, they don't get anything. The fruits, vegetable, everything get destroyed if they don't use it sometimes. But if they dry up these fruits and preserve it, they can use it in winter. The dryer cum heating system, and that heating system in winter can be used for heating their houses, also saving the kerosene and diesel which they otherwise use in the winter. That type of user-centric products are now coming up. And like 24/7 cold storage system, user-specific, 24/7 milk chilling unit, 24/7 cooking system, clean cooking, all these things in the renewable energy, off-grid system, user-friendly, they are coming up. I think this is a very valid thing. Apart from the utility scale big projects, these things will take over in the remote area. So these things are coming. Regarding CSP, Mr. Yogi said, yes, we are going to have another session tomorrow on the thermal side. There we'll have a more discussion on this. And Mr. Thomas said about that market, product and technology roadmap. Yes, very valid point. If there is a market, there is an economy in scale, and if you research in that direction, automatically the price will come down. Yes, we take a very valid thinking. And another thing, when aha movement, Mr. Kohli said 73% is aha movement. I say, why 73%? Why not 100% is aha movement for you? Let's all have aha movement with 100% renewable in the times to come. Thank you very much. I'll request, please bring some. And we had a very lovely discussion, very fruitful discussion with all of you. Thank you very much to all the panelists.